Hi, this is Matt with AppliancePartsPros.com. Today we'll be showing you how to repair your appliance. Remember, anytime you work on an appliance, make sure it's unplugged or the circuit breakers are off so there's no chance of electrocution. In this video, we're going to show you how to change out the Samsung dryer heating element. It's going to be a very easy repair and should only take a few minutes to show you how to do it. If you already have one of these, great. If not, you can click on the link below or get it at AppliancePartsPros.com. When you open up the package, you're going to get the new Samsung dryer heating element. The dryer heating element is what creates the heat inside the dryer. The main reason to be changing it out is if the element has shorted out and you're not getting any heat. In order to get to the part, we have to take the dryer apart, so we're going to use our Phillips screwdriver and go around back to remove the screws. Now that we have the screws out, we can remove the top. All you have to do is pull the top back, so a couple inches so it gets free of the brackets, and then you can lift it off and set it aside. Now that we have the top off, we can take the control panel off. There's a few locking tabs across the back. We're going to lift up on them to release them and then lift the panel forward. Once you have them all released, you can lift the panel off, and we're just going to set it on the top so it's out of the way. We can open up the dryer door, and we need to remove these two screws at the bottom. We're going to use our Phillips screwdriver to take them out. Now that we have those two screws removed, we can close the dryer door and remove the upper four screws. Now that we have the four screws removed, we can pull a panel forward just far enough so we have access to the door switch. If these two tabs right here are holding your panel on, you may have to lift it up a little bit and then pull it out. Once you have the panel released, you can close the door again, and then we're just going to drop it forward enough so you can reach in and pull off the wire harness. There's no locking tab or anything on this one, so all you have to do is pull it off and let it set out of the way. Then we can lift the front panel off the three mounting brackets on the bottom of the dryer. Once you have it off, you can set it aside. Now that we have the front panel off the dryer, we can take the heater element assembly out. First thing we're going to do is disconnect the moisture sensor. We don't want this wire harness to get tangled up when we're taking it out, so we're just going to disconnect it and lay it out of the way. Once you have that disconnected, we can use our Phillips screwdriver to remove these three screws that hold the heater element in. Alright, to get the heater assembly out, we're going to have to remove this lower bracket. So we're going to lift this up, and there's a locking tab right here on the front that we have to lift up, and then there's two locking tabs on the back. So we're going to carefully lift up the element and pull this front one out, and then reach in and just lift the bracket up a little bit and pull it out. Once you have it out, you can lower the heating element assembly down and very carefully pull it out of the duct in the back and guide it out this opening. And make sure this wire harness comes out from below the lint screen duct. Once you have the assembly out, you can set it on the ground so we can change the part. Now that we have the heating element assembly out of the dryer, we can disconnect all the wires. You want to remember where all these go, so if you have to, take a picture or write them down. On our dryer, it was red, blue, black, blue, blue, black. These are on there kind of tight, so if you have to, you can use a small screwdriver to help pop them off. Now that you have all the wires disconnected, you can pull the heating element assembly out. Now that we have the assembly out of the dryer, we have to take the element out of the housing. So the first thing we're going to do is take our needle nose pliers, and there's a tab on each of these connectors that we have to bend over so we can push the connection through the ceramic block. You may have to lift up on it with your hand so you can get the tab bent straight. Once you have it bent, you should be able to push it down through the ceramic block. Once you have both the terminals pressed through the ceramic block, we're going to take our Phillips screwdriver and remove the 2 screws on the bottom of the thermostat and the thermal fuse. Once you have the 2 screws out, we can lay the assembly down. Then we can remove the 7 screws that hold the element housing together. With all the screws out, we have to bend this tab up right here. So we're going to take our needle nose pliers again and bend this tab so we can release the 2 halves. Once you have the 2 halves separated, you can set the top half aside. We can pull the 2 terminals out of the ceramic block the rest of the way, and then lift the dryer heating element out of the lower half of the housing. Here's the old dryer heating element next to the new one. If you already have one of these, great. If not, you can get it at appliancepartspros.com. If the lower half of your housing was dirty, make sure you wipe it out before you put the new element in. Once you have it ready to go, we can set the new element in. Now that you have the element in place, we're going to put the terminals through the ceramic block. You want to put the lower one through the lower slot and the upper one through the upper. Once you have those in, we can set the upper half of the housing on and put the screws back in to hold it all together. Remember, we have to put this tab right here and bend it over on first. Once you have it on and lined up, we can take our needle nose pliers and bend this tab back over to lock it in place. Once you have it bent over, we can use our Phillips screwdriver and put the screws back in to hold the housing together. When you're putting these last couple of screws in, if the dryer element hole isn't lining up with the housing, you may have to put a small screwdriver through the hole to get them to line up. Once you have them lined up, you can put the screws in. Now we can turn the assembly on its edge so we can put the 2 screws in that hold the thermal fuse and the thermostat in place. Last thing we have to do before we put the assembly back in the dryer is bend the tabs over to hold the terminals in place. So if you have to, you can very carefully hold one side with your fingers and then grab your needle nose and bend these tabs over. Once you have it bent over, you should not be able to push the terminals back through the ceramic block. Now that we have the dryer heating element installed, we can put it back in the dryer. Now that we have the assembly put back together, we can bring it back over in front of the dryer, and we're going to reconnect the wire harnesses. All you have to do is reach in and grab the wire harness and swing it over so it's lined up with the terminals. We're going to hook up the element first. Remember, the blue was away from the dryer and the red was close to the dryer. And then we can hook up the thermostat. Remember, the blue was away from the dryer and the black was towards it. And for the thermal fuse, it was the opposite. black away from it, blue towards the dryer. Once you have all the wires hooked back up, we can carefully rotate the assembly back into the dryer, turn it around and feed it in there. And you're going to have to look inside and make sure you get it up into the ductwork. Once you have it in place, it'll stand there like that. And remember, we have to put the lower bracket back on. So there's these two holes right here that we have to put these two tabs in. It's going to be a little awkward, but you got to get in here and lift up on the heating element and get the bracket underneath. Once you have those tabs in the slots, we're going to lower the bracket down and make sure that this tab goes in its slot right there, and then set the element on top of the bracket. Once you have everything back in place, we can put in the 3 screws that hold it all in. First, we're going to put the element screw in, and then the 2 base screws. Once you have the element secure, we can reattach the moisture sensor wiring harness. All you have to do is grab both ends and plug them back together. Make sure they snap together so you get a good connection. Once you have that reconnected, we can put the rest of the dryer back together. Now we can put the front panel on the dryer. We're going to put it on the same way we took it off by setting it onto the 3 brackets across the bottom. Once you have it in place, we can lift it up so we can reconnect the door switch. To reconnect the door switch, there's no locking tab or anything on it, but you want to put this little notch right with this notch right here, and then push it all the way in so you get a good connection. Lift the front panel back up into place and make sure that little tab goes on there. With the front panel back in place, we can put these upper screws back in. We're going to use our Phillips screwdriver to put them back in. Now that we have the 4 top screws on, we can open up the door and replace the 2 screws that hold the front panel to the lint screen housing. Once you have those 2 in, we can close the dryer door and then we can go put the console back on. To put the console back on, there are these little tabs across the bottom and we have to line them up with the little openings on the front panel. So at not too much of an angle, but a little bit, you want to lower this down so those tabs go in, and then rotate it back so it snaps into place. And then once you have them all in, we can push it up and lock those tabs in that we took off earlier. Once you have that snapped into place, we can put the top back on. To put the top back on, we're going to set it down on top of the frame, and then we're going to push it forward so the lip right here goes underneath that bracket. Once you have it in and lined up, you can push it forward, and then we can use our Phillips screwdriver to put the screws in. Now that we have the top back on, we can plug the dryer back in and take it for a spin. Thanks for joining us for another successful repair brought to you by AppliancePartsPros.com. Check out our other repair videos on our site, Facebook, and YouTube.